All right.
Somebody stepped on my line.
Somebody stepped on the line big time. Although I will say that the person who says that in the song does sound like Sam the Tech Man a little bit.
It does.
All right. Hello and welcome to Misfits on Vinyl. My name is Hungover and I'm a little Spencer Streichert today. I'm an actor, comedian, and one of your hosts.
My name is Aaron. I am also one of your hosts.
And yeah, it's been a couple of weeks since we recorded. Because last weekend I was in the big old L.A.
Lethbridge,
Alberta, doing a little CBC taping.
The Mecca for fine arts.
Mecca for fine arts. It's weird that it is one of the places where there's professional theater in Western Canada.
The Windy City.
The Windy City.
Yeah.
Oh boy, a place where all the Mormons live. Mm-hmm. It was fun. It was
nice.
fun. Really good shows. On the taping night, it went really well. The one thing, my God, they hated my suicide jokes. Holy fuck, the old people that watched the CBC that came on out did not like it. They gave me nothing, and then like all my other jokes were killing, but those ones died. Like they really didn't like it. And then at one point I was like, you know, you guys can calm down. These aren't jokes. I'm not gonna go jump off your bridge or anything.
They're one bridge.
They're one bridge. But yeah, no, it was good. The shows were fun. Guy came up to us afterwards and he said to Brittany and Forrest, "You guys were great." And then he turned to me and he said, "Wow, those jokes need to be workshopped, eh?" And then he walked away and I was like, "What the fuck?" And like it just hurt so bad. And then literally a minute later, this like lady came up to me and she was like, "You were my favorite. I love your humor." I was like, "Oh, the universe is in balance again."
So what'd you learn in Lethbridge? That comedy is subjective.
Comedy is subjective,
Yeah.
and old people should take like my jokes and die.
Corona tried.
Corona
but it didn't
tried.
succeed completely.
Did not succeed. Yeah, it was fun.
Well, I'm glad you had a good time.
Yeah, and a lot of people came out for Brittany.
Nice.
Brittany's a name pull now.
Nice. That's
yeah.
good.
There was like 20 people that came out like each show to just see Brittany, which is great. We had one Misfits on Vinyl fan.
Oh, there we go.
That was
That's
really
cool.
cool. I forget their name now, but anyways,
Shout out to you.
Shout out to you.
Our Lethbridge fan.
Our Lethbridge fan. Thanks for coming on the Saturday night. You should have came on the Friday during the taping. Anyways.
Well, that was cool, man. I'm glad you had a good time for the old CBC.
For the old CBC.
They said your name. I was putting it in the chat all the time. I listened to the radio on my way to work in the morning, and I heard Spencer's name on the radio like 4 times. So that was.
And
really
you know
good.
what? It wasn't an Amber Alert.
No, it wasn't.
Which is
yeah, it wasn't an Amber Alert or like a suspicious person's report. No, it was just shouting out your body of work.
Shouting out the commodity.
Yeah. So like, they said your name a couple times, and I was like, oh, that's cool.
That is pretty
like,
cool.
I was like a proud dad.
Aw.
Yeah, so I had a little smile come to my face and like wish I never left you.
There was a little
when you were a
twinkle in your
child.
eye.
Yeah, I was
Aw.
like, I was thinking about all the checks I could be cashing in the future.
Dude, I was just thinking about the milk that you said you were going to bring home.
Yeah.
I still haven't drank milk since that
Still
day.
working on it, sorry. It's the great milk shortage of the past 25 years. It's been really hard to find a good gallon of milk.
Yeah, well, it's hard to find somebody that's lactating enough to fill a gallon.
Yeah, it's true.
That's a lot of milk.
That's the lifelong search. That's what
lifelong search.
That's what I've been going for.
I just put the titty in the top of the milk thing and I squirt it in.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting you to actually like act it out, but I appreciate
needed to act it out. We do have visual listeners.
Speaking of the mother's milk, shall we crack our beers?
Yes, let's do that.
We have from our unofficial sponsor, Cabin
Brewing.
Simple Pleasures. It's an English dark mild.
And you know what? I like that it is only 3.8% alcohol. Sam did not fuck us this week.
Sam has been bringing us some very heavy beers.
Tried to balance it out this week.
Ooh,
You know what? That makes sense. I appreciate the balance.
it looks good. Oh, that's nice.
Oh, wow. Oh, that fucks. I got a little in my mustache.
I like a good dark beer.
I do, too. I had a coffee stout last night. I don't know why. Those never are great.
That's not really one to mix in when you're like, having a session.
No, it's true. I probably shouldn't have.
No.
I guess the reason I'm hungover, I went to a wedding yesterday.
Yes.
It was a lot of fun. But there's a few things I need to bring up about weddings. One, I'm not a fan of weddings, more of a fan of funerals. I'll say that. I feel a little less bad at funerals than I do at weddings sometimes. Second thing, there's a lady that was sitting behind me. We're in like the second to back row.
Yeah.
I had my hat on. I was also the only person with a fancy dress hat, right? Which,
Nice.
That's fair, whatever. But we're in Alberta. It's not a big deal. The lady behind me was getting pissed off because she couldn't fucking see past my hat. But the lady in front of me, bobblehead Jane, just fucking like this the whole goddamn time. So I had to keep moving to see what was happening on the,
Nice.
the front.
Yeah, because it's like you're at the hockey game, but it's like people standing still. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I gotta catch all the action.
Like, what the fuck? Yeah, so that was annoying.
oh, that's fun.
But the bartender was playing a little game called Let's just get Spencer fucking
Let's
wrecked.
get everybody fucked up.
Oh my god. Open bar, first of all, which
Yeah.
is that's dangerous at a wedding. I feel like that makes it a little risky. But what was really funny, I asked for rye on the rocks, and the guy gave me rye with one rock, and I swear to God, it was like 6 ounces of rye. I was like, Jesus. Well, this is my drink for the next hour, I guess.
I'm surprised you're alive today because by the like the track record of your drinks so far, you've mentioned that they sound like they don't mix.
Yeah, I also
Rye
had
in the
red
Rock,
wine.
coffee style, red wine.
Yep. There was Prosecco.
Ooh,
There was some Prosecco.
yeah,
Prosecco.
yes,
Prosecco.
I know what it is. Yeah.
Prosecco.
Okay, yeah. And what else did you drink besides prosecco, red wine, coffee stout, and rye on the rocks? Did you mix in a water in there?
I did drink a lot
Okay,
of water,
that's
actually.
good. That's
Yeah,
good.
no, I did
That's
drink a
probably
lot of
why
water.
you're alive today.
You know what else I drank?
What?
Prosecco.
Nice. All right, let's cheers so
Let's
we can move on
cheers.
from this part of this conversation.
Also, we got to shout out the Vidos.
Yes, of course.
Doing the intro song. They're going to be on the pod next week.
We got lots of exciting guests.
We got
coming
lots
up.
of exciting guests. I am super stoked. I watched one of our guests, Red Richardson. I watched his special last night. It came out. I watched it when I was very drunk, but it was very funny still.
Nice.
There's a few really good jokes in there. I can't wait to bring up to him. He's very much like me. He's a dark humor kind of guy, but he's a little more dry because
Nice.
he's a Brit.
Nice.
You know those Brits
I do.
with their dryness.
I'm aware of the British.
It's weird that the
Believe it or
British have a
not.
dry sense of humor when their country's so wet.
That's true. They do get quite a bit of rain.
They get a lot of rain.
Yeah.
They're like Vancouver, but if Vancouver was an island.
Yeah, and British.
And British.
But I mean, technically, British Columbia, that's close enough.
And it does have Vancouver Island.
Yeah, they do have Vancouver Island, yeah.
Which, did you know that's all like almost the same size as the UK?
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't
Did you
know
know
that.
that you could fit all of the UK between Edmonton and our like southern border with Montana?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Not a big country.
But I know you can get like across the UK in like a good 12 hours. Maybe,
Yeah.
Maybe less.
Yeah, probably
Yeah,
less.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you walked, it would take you like at least 3 hours.
Yeah. Was the one that got swam around it.
What?
Yeah, he swam around the UK. And he was in the salt water for so long that his tongue like fucking blew up like huge.
Whoa.
Yeah. Really interesting.
I wonder
watch.
what that would have tasted like if you ate his tongue.
Yeah, it's a more interesting watch than what we're doing right now.
Okay.
Okay.
With that being said, let's get into the podcast.
Yes, this is one of the ones I wrote.
This is
today.
one of the ones Aaron wrote.
Yeah.
I did not actually read any of the
So
things this week.
expect excessive information.
Excessive information and useless things coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
That's basically that's basically what it is. You remember the Strokes episode? It'll be
Yeah.
that, but more subdued because
Yes.
I'm a lot hungover.
Yeah, and you're more familiar with this album. I
That's
think,
true.
than the Strokes one. So
Yeah, there was quite a few songs that I recognized from this album. So every episode on Misfits on vinyl, we pick an album. Usually it's one of our favorites or it's a popular one, and then we go through the history of the album and the artist. And this week we got. Are you ready to do the magic?
yeah.
Townes Van Zandt's third album, Townes Van Zandt.
Yes. His debut third album.
His debut third album.
Self-titled album, which he's got a couple, but this is his first self-titled album.
First self-titled album. This is the one where he's sitting on the chair in the kitchen.
Yes.
So This is his third studio album.
Yes.
Its genre is described as country folk and progressive country or sad yeehaw.
Yeah, I put that in. I saw a comment on a YouTube video that's like, it's sad yeehaw.
Which,
and I was
you
like,
know what? It very much is.
it is sad yeehaw.
I will say this: what I thought was really interesting was because it's such of that like Americana sort of thing, but it sounds so much like John Denver's music with a little bit of Corb Lund's vocals. Is what it reminded me of. Like it was very similar chord progressions. I thought it was a really cool album.
Yeah, no, it's it's of that time, like John Denver's time, late 60s. I think it's 1969. This album was
1969,
released.
you're
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
July 1969 was when it was recorded.
And it was released September of 1969.
By Poppy Records.
Poppy Records.
Poppy Records.
See, I got a bit of a weird memory. So like we did with the Strokes episode, I'll certainly fill in information as we go. But it's his third album, 1969. One thing interesting about this album specifically is he re-recorded 4 of his tracks from his first album. Yeah, I think I put a little thing in and we'll get to it. You start reading through, but
so one thing that's kind of cool is he did the vocals, the guitar, and the violin, which I think is pretty impressive. What I think is really funny is the violin is very subtle on this album.
Yeah.
There's only a few places where you really notice a fiddle. One thing that I thought was really cool is each track had a different... this is just something that I picked up on. Each track had a different instrument that was only on that one track. And it would be like, it would be featured, but very subtly, like harmonica or like the fucking trumpet.
there's one song with a little bit of drums in it that comes in out a little bit out of nowhere.
But it's like so funny because it's so subtly layered in there.
It's certainly a stripped down album. Townes Van Zandt's very famous for his finger picking style of guitar playing, and then of course his lyrics and his songwriting is really why people gravitate towards him. He's a a songwriter, same as like, MF Doom's your rapper's, your favorite rapper's favorite rapper.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing. So like the Bob Dylans of the world, the Willie Nelsons, all those guys view TVZ as, the man when it comes to songwriting.
Do you know what you call a guitar playing chicken?
What?
Finger picking good.
I would like to finger pick up a gun and leave it at that.
Okay, so he's got poetic lyrics that contain overarching themes of depression sprinkled in with working life, reflections of his past relationships, and contemplation of his future. What I think is funny is one of my favorite songs is the third song on there, the one about the train robbers.
Yeah,
that is such a fucking cool song, and it reminded me so much of like the Johnny Cash style of like singing a song that tells a story.
Yeah,
or like Marty Robbins in a way, where you're listening to a story and you can pick it apart and it paints such a visual in your head as to what's happening. Okay, includes 4 re-recordings on previous tracks of his album. Waiting Around to Die, which is the song I just mentioned, I'll Be Here in the Morning, and Quicksilver Daydreams of Maria. He was unhappy with the original recordings, so he just did it again.
Yeah, he said there was too much like production. I can't remember the exact terms he said, but yeah, he didn't like the original recordings. Waiting Around to Die is actually the first song he ever wrote.
Really?
Which is very interesting, yeah, because it's one of his most famous and probably arguably one of his best songs. But yeah, it's one of the first songs he ever wrote.
I would say that one and I'll Be Here in the Morning are my 2 favorites from the album.
I like Colorado Girl.
Colorado Girl is really good.
But yeah, I mean, the most of this episode, like I wrote quite a bit about his life because that's kind of the myth of him. He's like a cult legends type of singer. So his life and his life story is very interesting, and that kind of to today, because in most of his life he wasn't famous and he wasn't a big name, but now he's kind of come back over the years, and his life is really the interesting part of this whole thing. Like his music obviously is very good, but the actual story of him is what draws me to his music personally.
Yeah.
He's got kind of this outsider sort of perspective on life and kind of lives on the beaten path and doesn't follow the regular conventions of society and things like that. It's very interesting. So.
Man, I love people like that. They're fucking just interesting as hell. Okay, so this was produced by Kevin Eggers and Jim Malloy. Eggers is Townes' longtime collaborator and manager for Townes and worked with him consistently his whole life. James Edward Malloy is a recording engineer who worked with such artists as Elvis Presley, Duke Ellington, Johnny Cash, Henry Mancini, and Malaya Jackson.
So he actually won an Oscar for a Mancini movie. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, for scoring a movie. Yeah.
Wow.
I can't remember the name of the movie, but I thought that was a little interesting fact as well.
That is an interesting fact. I love that. Okay, the cover photograph was taken by Sol Mendek in the kitchen of Poppy Records art.
Sorry, did I type
in
that?
The kitchen of Poppy Records. Artwork designer.
Poppy Records artwork designer.
Okay,
yeah,
fuck.
sorry.
Okay, no, that was my fault. I didn't realize that
It's a continuous sentence.
Okay, so artwork designer Milton Glaser. Glaser tackled the final design, of the album and is famous for designing the I Love New York logo and founding New York Magazine. Wow.
Yeah, so he's like the I Heart New York. That's,
yeah.
I mean, it's not that creative of a logo, but yeah, he's a famous designer.
It's so funny because that's now used in every single fucking titty.
Yeah, and
titty.
every city. Yeah, it's used in every titty. Yeah, correct. One thing too cool, I think I had it at the start of this little section there. It was recorded in a barn in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Which is another titty. Outside of Nashville, which is a great titty.
I think it's the capital titty.
Yeah, it's the capital titty of Tennessee. But actually, I think Knoxville is the capital titty of Tennessee. I don't know though.
Is Knoxville the capital titty?
Gotta love it when Spencer can't speak properly.
Massachusetts.
Throwback, yeah.
Okay.
Regain your composure.
Choose your fighter. The album cover features Townes sitting in the kitchen with his hands leaning on his head. Or with his head leaning on his hands. Fuck me. Can you do the reading?
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay, fuck. I'm gonna join in and be you this episode.
Eyes, so I'm putting it right here.
Okay.
The album cover features Townes sitting in the kitchen with his head leaning on his hands. Biographer John Kruth observes, Van Zandt now appears withdrawn. Here he sits resigned, head in hand, in a perfectly painted kitchen where everything is neatly arranged like a dollhouse. Some fans refer to this album as the Kitchen Album. And one thing I'd said earlier, but it was actually a quote directly from Chris Christopherson, which is a great name. He described Van Zandt as a songwriter.
Wow.
Which is cool.
Which is also really cool because Chris Christopherson, for those that don't know, was one of the outlaw country greats. Mm-hmm. He's like basically one of the people who redefined the genre. He doesn't nearly get as much credit as Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Merle Haggard, but he was up there with them.
And Star is Born too. Yep. I like his music actually.
I really like his music, and also the Highwaymen. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was a part of the Highwaymen. That's one of the greatest super groups of all time.
So let's get into About the Artist. I'm having a tough time scrolling on your computer. About the Artist. John Townes Van Zandt was born March 7th, 1944 in Fort Worth, Texas.
Ooh.
He was born into a wealthy family. Van Zandt was the great-great-grandson of Isaac Van Zandt, a prominent leader in the Republic of Texas.
Ooh,
and
I thought he was going to have discovered gravity.
No, it's about to get a little iffy, though. He was a great-great-grandnephew of Kebler Miller Van Zandt, a major in the Confederate Army and one of the founders of Fort Worth.
Oh no.
Townes Van Zandt's father, Harris Van Zandt, he was a corporate lawyer. His career required the family to move around several times during the 50s and 60s. In 1952, the family relocated from Fort Worth to Midland, Texas for 6 months. Then they moved to Billings, Montana. And in the following years, they lived in Boulder, Colorado, followed by Minnesota. And then they were back to Houston.
Shout out to Billings.
Yeah, I've been to Billings.
I like Montana.
It's not a bad little town.
I like Montana in general. Montana's a good state.
Christmas in 1956, I believe they were in Montana at this time.
Ooh.
Townes' father gave him a guitar, which he practiced while wandering the countryside, which is a very classic thing to do. I bet he had a piece of straw in his mouth as well, and he was fiddling the guitar.
Walking down the fucking dirt roads.
But he saw something on TV which he thought was really cool. He saw Elvis playing on the Ed Sullivan Show. He said in an interview, he said,
"Those hips gave me a boner."
He said, Seeing Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show was the starting point for me becoming a guitar player. I just thought Elvis had all the money in the world, all the Cadillacs, all the girls, and all he did was play the guitar and sing. That made a big impression on me. It's like, oh yeah, I can get pussy. He's like 10 years old. He's like, oh, wicked.
He's like
girls.
He's like, wait, if I can pick this guitar really well, then I can see some titties.
So Townes was a good student in school. He was found to have a high IQ, and his parents kind of began grooming him to become a lawyer or a senator. So there was a little bit of pressure on him as a kid because he was found to be a great student. In 1962, he enrolled at the University of Colorado, Boulder. During his time, though, it didn't go well.
What was he in? What was he
it
studying?
didn't say.
Okay.
But he.
So he was probably like me, open studies.
Yeah, probably. And similar to you, he was drinking heavily, and he began writing poetry, and he spent a lot of hours listening to records by Lightning Hopkins and Hank Williams.
Ooh.
In the spring of his second year, his parents flew to Boulder, Colorado to bring Townes back to Houston. Worried about his binge drinking and his episodes of depression, they admitted him into the University of Texas's medical branch in Galveston. I told you there's a lot of information.
Wow, so just like me, he had depression and was a genius.
Where he was diagnosed with manic depression. This is where it gets kind of sad. He received 3 months of insulin shock therapy. So that's where they overload you with insulin and actually put you into a temporary coma. And they were doing that for 3 months straight. And he suffered long-term memory loss and a bunch of other mental health issues because of this time.
Jesus Christ.
After that, in hindsight, his mother said that it was the biggest regret of her life that she allowed that treatment to happen to him.
You fucking think?
Yeah, I mean,
it's also sad because like back then, how many of these medical treatments were like, recommended?
Mm-hmm. It was. I mean, it was done by a university accredited medical. Yeah.
This is like 4 years after they were like, lobotomy is not a good idea.
Yeah. So after his insulin shock therapy, he attempted to join the Air Force, but was rejected because this is the diagnosis from the doctor. The diagnosis that labeled him an acute manic depressive that has made minimal adjustments to life.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he didn't get into the Air Force. So in 1965, he was accepted into the University of Houston's pre-law program to go to law school.
Too bad he wasn't joining the Japanese Air Force at that time.
Yeah.
They would have taken him.
Yeah, probably. So
Harbor, anyone?
He did
Pearl
a little
Harbor?
bit of schooling for that, but in after about a year of schooling, his dad died in 1966. And he decided to quit school, go on the road, and start playing music. He was inspired by a bunch of singer-songwriters at the time, Bob Dylan, Hank Williams, all those guys. So he started playing regular shows in the Jester Lounge in Houston for $10 a night. And that lounge closed, and he began regularly performing at Sand Mountain Coffee House, where he lives sometimes too. He would live in the back room. During this time, he was primarily performing covers songs, mostly by Bob Dylan and a couple other singer-songwriters. Mm-hmm. He is a kind of a weird thing. He's got a weird range of inspirations for his music. He cited Lightning Hopkins, Bob Dylan, Hank Williams, Muddy Waters, the Rolling Stones, Blind Willie McTell, Tchaikovsky, and Jefferson Airplane as having a major impact on his music.
Wow. Okay, you know what's funny though is like if you listen to Jefferson Airplane, you can hear a lot of like the similar sound.
So he seems to be like the type of guy that's just taken in a lot of music, and I guess the type of artist that finds inspiration really anywhere, which I think does reflect in his music. So we're gonna jump ahead a little bit.
So it's kind of like me as a comedian.
Yeah,
'cause I take inspiration from everything.
Yeah, you're like, oh, that was a funny poop. I'm gonna talk about it for the next 3 years.
That.
Yeah.
Like the time
I get
that
it.
I pooped out popcorn kernels.
Yeah,
it was like a shotgun blast into the toilet bowl.
Lovely.
I told that in front of my fraternity's 50th anniversary dinner.
Yeah, I'm sure that went well too.
They did not like it.
Yeah, I was gonna say
very not well received.
So the years between 68 and 73 was his most prolific era. He released 6 albums during that time.
Wow.
For the Sake of the Song, Our Mother of the Mountains, Townes Van Zandt, which we're talking about today, Delta Mountain Views, High, Low, and in between in the late great Townes Van Zandt.
Ooh.
75, he was this is the clip I sent you. He was featured this is a tough word too, prominently in the documentary film Heartworm Highways. His segment of the film was shot in his rundown trailer, where Van Zandt was shown drinking straight whiskey in the middle of the day, shooting and playing with guns and performing the songs "Waiting Around to Die" in Poncho and Lefty.
Which also, it's funny that he was was he not the writer of Poncho and Lefty?
He is the original writer
Which
of
is
Poncho and Lefty.
Crazy, because that is one of my favorite Willie Nelson songs, and I had no idea that it was not written by Willie Nelson.
We'll get to it a little bit later, but that's also one of the reasons why he started to gain a little more fame later in life. That song was recorded, I think, in '83, so that kind of shot him up into more mainstream circles when that song got covered by him, by Nelson and Merle Haggard. Yeah. So that's a big thing that happened to him, and there was another cover as well. I got it written down here. So despite his critical acclaim at the time, he remained a cult figure. He played small venues, often to crowds fewer than 50 people. For much of the 70s, he lived a reclusive life outside of Nashville in a tin roof, bare board shack with no heat, plumbing, telephone, and he'd occasionally show up in town and play some shows. During the 80s, he began to reach a much wider audience and more acclaim when several of his songs were recorded by other artists, such as Emmylou Harris with Don Williams. They recorded the number 3 country hit. They re-recorded "If I Needed You," and then, of course, Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard taking Poncho and Lefty to number 1 in 1983. So this is interesting, too. This is something I found cool about him. This is a cool story. So during a chance encounter outside a costume shop in the South Congress District of Austin on June 24th, 1986, Townes Van Zandt met Bob Dylan. Dylan was reportedly a big fan of Townes and claimed to have all of his records. Dylan later arranged another meeting with the songwriter. The Drag in Austin, which is like their main little area, was shut down due to Dylan being in town. So Van Zandt rolled up in his motorhome to the cordoned off area, after which Dylan came on and asked Townes to play some songs for him.
Wow.
So following the meeting, Townes Van Zandt turned down repeated invitations to write with Bob Dylan.
What the fuck?
He said he admired Dylan's songs but didn't care for his celebrity. So
that's so weird. I wonder how that meeting sounded.
Yeah. No,
Can you write some songs for me?
And he's like, "No, I like your songs, but not your fame.
I'll pay you a lot of money."
He's like, "No, I don't care for money.
I'll give you a lot of free drinks.
He would care for that, actually, which we'll get to shortly after this. So his personal life was very tumultuous.
Have you ever thought that Norm Macdonald and Bob Dylan kind of sound the
same? A little bit, yeah.
Like, I just realized that Norm Macdonald sounds like talking Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Like, if you took his song singing and made him talky.
And, like, if Norm Macdonald was gargling like water, he would sound like singing Bob Dylan.
That's so true.
There you go. So Townes' personal life was a bit tumultuous. His first child, JT, was born in '69 with his wife, Fran Peterson. They divorced the next year in 1970.
Nice.
And then he began dating Cindy Morgan in '74.
Was she hot?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think she's in the film. I think she's okay looking.
Decent looking?
It's tough to say. I bet she had some of the 70s things going on.
Yeah. The big old bush.
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to.
You know what?
Exactly.
I love a thick bush.
They dated for most of the 70s, and they were married in 78, but shortly after they became estranged and they didn't see each other. Eventually they divorced in 1983 after years with no contact, and then he married Janine Munsell in 83.
Ooh.
And they remained married until 1994, having 2 kids during their time together, which is William Vincent in 83 and Katie Bell in 1992.
Katie Bell.
Despite them divorcing, Townes remained very devoted to Janine and his children. He ended up signing over all of his publishing rights to his music during their separation in 94, and he just lived off of the revenue of performing concerts.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and he was towards the end of his life, which is very interesting for having, even though he's from a rich family and kind of living a bare bones lifestyle, not really having a use for money. He talks about not really caring for money. He was making over $100,000 a year on royalties from mostly Poncho and Lefty.
Holy shit.
If I Needed You. Yeah. So this is like in the 90s he was making that sort of money towards the end of his life. So this is
So he's dead?
Yes.
Oh,
so we'll get to that too. So this is kind of this is the thing that I left in a separate category. we're gonna talk about his addiction issues.
Okay, I didn't want him to die.
Yeah,
That's
well,
sad.
he was waiting around for it to happen.
That's
so.
true.
He was addicted to heroin and alcohol throughout
Ooh.
most of his life. At times, he became drunk on stage and forgot the lyrics to his songs. At one point, his heroin habit was so intense that he offered his manager, Kevin Eggers, the publishing rights to all of his songs on each of his first 4 albums for $20.
What?
At various points in his life, his friends saw him shoot up not just heroin, but also cocaine, vodka, as well as a mixture of rum and coke. And at least on one occasion, he was caught shooting up in the presence of his son, JT, who was 8 years old at the time.
Ooh.
Yeah. As a result of his constant drinking, Harold Eggers, Kevin's brother, his manager's brother, was hired to be his full-time tour manager and 24-hour caretaker in 1976. A partnership that lasted the rest of the singer's life. Although the singer was, although Townes was like years older than Harold, Harold viewed Townes as his first child because he was basically taking care of him nonstop.
Holy shit.
He was in rehab like over a dozen times between the 70s and the 80s. Medical records from the recovery centers indicated that he believed his drinking had become a problem around 1973. His parents thought it was a problem around 1965. So it's a long history of heavy drinking.
There was a big ol' 8 years there where he was not realizing how bad it was.
By 82, he was drinking at least a pint of vodka daily.
Wow.
Doctors noted he admits to hearing voices, mostly musical voices.
I mean, that's pretty cool, though.
And the effect
if you're
of it,
going to have voices in your head, they should be singing.
the effect of alcohol they listed is kind of like anybody on alcohol, but he said the effect is a blunted mood, and he is sad. Judgment and insight is impaired. And so it's very standard stuff for an alcoholic. And throughout his life, he was prescribed tons of antidepressives, Zolofts, and mood stabilizer lithium.
Did he shoot those up?
I don't know, probably. The longest time he was sober in his adult life was for about a year in 1989 and 1990.
Oh, shit.
So this is kind of getting now to the end of his life, which is sad. So is on the 19th or the 20th December, 1996, Van Zandt fell down a set of concrete stairs outside of his home, badly injuring his hip. After lying outside for an hour, he dragged himself inside and called his ex-wife Janine, who sent friends Roy Ann and Jim Calvin to check him out. He told the couple that he had sustained the injury while getting out of bed and refused any medical treatment. They took him back to their home, and he spent Christmas week on their couch, and he was unable to get up or even use the bathroom.
Jesus.
His hip was so fucked up, yeah. So he was scheduled to do an album, and he was so determined to do the album, Van Zandt arrived at the Memphis studio being pushed in a wheelchair by Harold Eggers. The producer of that album was Steve Shelley of Sonic Youth. He kind of sought out Townes to do this album. It was kind of a big thing for him personally because he was a big fan of him. He ended up canceling the sessions because he was so drunk and he was acting so erratically. After that, he finally agreed to go to the hospital, but not before he returned to Nashville. He had to go to Nashville first. So by the time he received medical care, 8 days after he hurt his hip, on December 31st, X-rays revealed that Van Zandt had impacted left femoral neck fracture in his hip, and several corrective surgeries were going to have to be performed. Janine informed the surgeon that one of Townes' previous rehab doctors had told him that detoxing could kill him. So the medical staff tried to explain to her that, a late-term alcoholic, you can't detox them at home. It'd be ill-advised, and he would have a better chance of recovering at the hospital.
Yeah.
But she didn't. She did not heed the warnings, and she decided after the surgery, she checked Townes out of the hospital. Understanding that he would probably drink right away after leaving the hospital, they didn't give him any pain medication, which he actually, as soon as he got out of the hospital, they got in the car and she gave him fucking vodka.
What the fuck?
Yeah. So by the time he
Janine.
By the time he checked out of the hospital early next morning, he began to show delirium tremors. Janine rushed him to the car where she gave him a flask of vodka to ward off the withdrawal delirium. She later reported after getting him back home in Smyrna, Tennessee, she gave him more alcohol and he became lucid and had a real good mood, and he was chatting up his friends on the phone. Jim Calvin came over. They smoked a joint together, and he was given about 4 Tylenol PMs to fight his pain. Later on the next day, Janine was on the phone, and her son Will noticed that Townes had stopped breathing and looked dead, and alerted his mother, who attempted to perform CPR on him between the breaths. She was yelling his name. Imagine how traumatic that was for the poor kid.
Fucking no kidding.
Yeah. So she attempted to do CPR. Unfortunately, Townes Van Zandt died in the early morning of New Year's Day, 1997, at the age of 52.
Jesus.
His official cause of death was a natural cardiac arrhythmia. There was 2 services held, one in Texas for family, and another large Nashville service attended by friends, acquaintances, and some fans. Some of his ashes were placed underneath a headstone in the Van Zandt family plot in Vidos Cemetery in Vidos, Texas, near Fort Worth. After his death, this is kind of the sad part, which also adds to a little bit of a sad life, I guess, of wasted potential. But after his death, there was a long legal battle regarding his publishing rights between the former manager and the label owner of Poppy Records and then Tomato Records, who recorded all of his music on, Kevin Eggers. After he
didn't work with Celery Records too.
Very nice, very nice. After he died, Kevin released 14 albums of new and old material without the estate's permission, claiming he had owned 50% ownership of over 80 songs from the recording studio. Eventually, the court sided with the estate after 10 years of legal battles.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Did they get back pay for that?
I'm assuming so. It didn't really say, but so that's kind of the whole footnotes of his life, basically.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, so it's kind of depressing how long his life was. It kind of makes sense he makes depressing music.
You know what's crazy is, like, it sounds a lot the exact same as Chet Baker.
Yeah.
Like, the exact same sort of, like, musical brilliance, but, like, cannot, like, no willingness to get off of the sauce.
Whatever that thing was he had, he could never get over it.
Yeah.
He could never get over it. And like we kind of alluded at before, but he's been... in the grand scheme of singer-songwriters and music, he's one of the, he's been cited as influential for Bob Dylan, for all sorts of big bands over time, lots of small country artists as well.
I will say this, though. It is nice that he passed in 97 because he missed 9/11.
It's true.
He didn't have to live through that.
I don't think he'd give a fuck.
Never forget.
I don't think he would really care.
He would have forgot.
Yeah, probably. He had memory loss issues, so he definitely would have forgot. He really would. He'd be like, I'm supposed to go to that Jackson 5 reunion concert. What's that all about? Like, nobody's here. So notable tracks and singles on this album: I'll Be Here in the Morning, Waiting Around to Die, Lungs, Colorado Girl, Fare Thee Well, Miss Carousel, and None But the Rain. Now, the reception on this album, which is kind of interesting because it didn't sell very much. That
makes sense. 69, it makes sense.
So Kevin Eggers, the manager, is a really trustworthy source, says that the sales range from like 50 to 100 albums a week when it first released. It's got good reviews, though. I think they're more in hindsight now. Most of the reviews, it was hard to find a lot of information.
A lot in retrospect.
Yeah, so AllMusic gave it a 4 out of 5. It was an 8.5 out of 10 on Aphoristic Album Reviews, and Pitchfork named it number 176 of the 200 best albums of the 1960s.
Wow.
Which is cool. Now, we got a little bit about the culture at the time, which is always fun. We don't always do
the other
this.
albums in the 60s that were on the top of that list were all Beatles albums, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Leonard
Rolling
Cohen,
Stones. Yeah.
Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
And Jefferson Airplane had one in there.
Mm-hmm. So this is a big year. 69 is a big year.
Yep.
You wrote 1969, baby. Which, it was a big year.
It was a big year.
So I did some footnotes.
We had Woodstock.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
Woodstock.
in there. The moon landing.
Moon landing.
Mm-hmm. Let me just read off the list I made.
Okay.
So 69, the U.S., there's a couple footnotes of the year. The U.S. instituted the draft lottery for the Vietnam War. The moon landing, like I said. The Beatles played their last live performance on top of the Apple building. And then there was the...
Have you seen the Let It Be documentary yet?
Yes, I did.
I haven't. I really want to.
It's good.
It's good?
Yeah.
I know a guy who was like one of the
Oh, that's
Really?
pretty cool.
Yeah, I worked with them.
That's pretty
Really
cool.
bro.
That's a cool little thing.
I knew one of the Tommies from that.
Shut the fuck up.
Woodstock, like you mentioned, there was 500,000 people went to Woodstock, 35 performers. PBS was started.
Oh,
The Summer of Love.
public
of course.
broadcasting system.
Charles Manson murdered 5 people. August
Rest
9th.
in peace, Charles.
Sesame Street debuts.
Ooh.
Tricky Dick was inaugurated as the 37th president of the United States. Pierre Trudeau is the Prime Minister of Canada.
Oh God.
There was 250,000 people went to protest the March on Washington against the Vietnam War. And then I wrote a little couple things just because inflation's a hot topic nowadays. So the average cost of a house was $15,000. The average income of it per year was $8,500. The average monthly rent was $135. The average cost of a new car was $32.70, which would have been great for you, Sam.
Yeah. Fuck.
Cost of a gallon of gasoline was 35 cents.
Oh.
God bless.
Oh fuck. You know how much that hurts to hear all of that?
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing that doesn't hurt is the salary for the year.
Yeah, but I mean, in hindsight, like if you could buy a house with, like, look at if an average
Basically,
cost,
2 years salary. You
average
own a house.
cost of a new house is $15,000.
Yeah.
Now it's 2
Bucks.
years' salary.
Yeah, and you're getting paid $85 a year.
Yeah.
That's pretty fucking mint. You pay off your house in just say 5 years instead of having a 30-year mortgage.
Yeah.
for 4.5%. Yeah, no. Certainly it was a nice time to be alive.
Jesus tits.
Yeah, you could just spend 3 years in Nam and you could have a house. It's like worth it. Yeah.
If you made it.
If you
I
made
mean,
it, yeah.
okay, actually, this is a weird thing. Did you hear about the fucking tunnel rats?
No.
Okay, so in Nam, because
Nam?
like the Vietnamese started to figure out that like they couldn't fight like above ground, like, and they couldn't have bases above ground, so they would build these tunnels, and they would be these massive cave systems underground.
Okay, yeah, I knew about the tunnels.
Yeah, and so they'd like have to like crawl through them, right? But then you'd get through, and there'd be like a room like this size that was underground. So the Australians and the Americans started specifically picking people that were under like 5'3" and like really skinny to be tunnel rats. And the stories that they have are fucking insane because they after a while the Vietnamese started booby trapping the tunnels. So you'd be like crawling through, and all of a sudden you'd fall into like a pit of fucking venomous snakes, or like they didn't have lights on, so they'd see a flashlight and they'd just shoot down the fucking.
See, like by the sounds of it, like Vietnam was kind of like an Indiana Jones movie.
It was.
Yeah, it's like you gotta dodge this boulder and avoid this booby trap and jump over the snakes.
It always gotta be snakes.
I know,
Yeah.
why's it always gotta be snakes?
And also Nazis,
Yeah, yeah. Well, there was no Nazis in Vietnam, but
wasn't there?
no,
I thought there was.
no. Yeah.
They're the ones landing the moon rocket.
Yeah. Whoa. That's if the moon landing even happened.
That's true.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure Stanley Kubrick did that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I do like 2001. It was pretty realistic.
It was.
Yeah. I think he faked the moon
I
landing.
cannot let you do that. Okay.
Anyways, let's get into the criticisms of this album. Spencer didn't write anything, so I'll talk for the
I
the
didn't
both.
write anything because I didn't want to look at the sheet yet.
His criticism is I gotta listen to it more.
Yeah, honestly, my criticism was that because I listened to it 4 times this week.
My criticism is it can't be an all the time listen.
Yeah.
Because it bums you out.
It really does.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was listening to it like this week before going to set, and I was just like, "This is weird" because it's not putting me in a great mood before.
No,
you
it's
know?
certainly an album. Like I have a rainy day playlist, and I got a couple songs off this album on it. Like if you're in a bummed out mood, it's a good one to like sit in your shit and
Yeah.
listen to it.
I will say though, "I'll Be There in the Morning" is like a pretty happy song.
Yeah, oh yeah, that one's not a bad song. Colorado Girl is not that sad either.
Yeah.
Going back to Denver. I mean, I've never been to Denver, but I don't know.
Well, you've been in Calgary, and that's
Yeah.
basically Denver.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Denver North.
Denver North.
Denver North. But yeah, I'd say it can't be an all the time listen.
Yeah.
Just because it is a little bit of a bummer sometimes, especially a couple of tracks can kind of get you down in the dumps.
I would also say melodically, it's very similar throughout. Like it's almost the same like each song does sound very similar.
Yeah.
In its structure, so it's kind of hard to tell until he starts singing what song you're listening to sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I listened to this album and kind of listened to his music mostly when I was like really depressed. Yeah, it was a bit of like 4 years ago. I was really in the dumps, and yeah, I listened to a lot of this style of music. A bit of Tom Waits too. Really keep me in the dumps. Yeah, not like the newer Tom Waits, like the older Tom Waits.
Like the older one.
Yeah, not like the super weird Tom Waits stuff, but the older Tom Waits stuff. But yeah, that sort of mood. So like, I don't know, if you find a time to listen to it where you're really sad and got the blues, it might be a good listen for you. But you can't listen to it all the time. Like even putting it in the rotation was just like, I'm gonna feel sad like when it comes on. So
yeah,
it was also really depressing. I was in traffic on Deerfoot and I was listening to Waiting Around to Die. I was like, yeah, it kind of feels that way. Fucking bumper to bumper traffic for, like fucking 40 minutes. I'm glad you're rubbing your beard like that. It makes me really comfortable.
It makes me feel good.
So I guess we kind of talked a lot about his life, and we can talk more about the music itself when we get into the rating and the review of the album.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
dude, those were like
Spencer's falling apart right now. So every week on Misfits on Vinyl, I'm doing Spencer's role. We rate and review an album on multiple different categories. So we start with technical, musical, lyrics, album art, reception, and does it hold up? And then we give it a final score out of 10.
Out of 10.
So we'll start with the technical element. I mean, you can't really, personally, I think you can't give it that high of a technical because it's very simplistic production. I mean, that also kind of goes for the music element as well. It's not that it's bad. It's just very stripped down, bare bones.
Yeah, and like you said, it was recorded in a barn.
Yeah.
Like it's not, and it does have like a very nice sound to it, but it is very still stripped down.
To be clear, the barn was a studio in a barn.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not like the...
I thought there was cows around.
Yeah.
I thought there was a fucking goat.
Yeah.
He's got a fucking couple of chickens in the studio with him.
Yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, sounds like how he was living his regular life.
Yeah, regular life. Every day he was just getting up beside the cow.
One thing I thought interesting, too, and he had a wolf dog. Which is also cool. He had a dog that was fucking half wolf that he'd hang around with in the 70s.
That thing was not fed properly.
No, probably not.
It was neither were his kids,
Probably just gave it fucking like cans of beans. Well, actually, like I said, one thing he did do well is, I mean, he handed out most of his finances over to his ex-wife to take care of their children.
That's true. But it was his most recent ex-wife.
Yes.
Which is it's kind of the Julian Lennon complex, you know?
Yeah, JT, I think, definitely got the rough end of the stick.
Yeah. What a fucking shit end that is.
Yeah, he definitely got the rough end of the stick. But he was kind of, one thing too, I guess, is we didn't really mention, but he was hanging around in the Austin area and hanging around with a lot of other of those crew in the start of like South by Southwest and stuff like that. So he was hanging around a lot with like Blaze Foley and a couple other these cult-like singer-songwriters. He was actually inducted into the South by Southwest Hall of Fame.
Oh,
would have been in 2012, I think, or 2013. So he was really big in that Texas scene at the time.
Yeah.
This is before Austin was Austin. So it was, actually had a bit of country flair, and it wasn't just a bunch of people from LA.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
had culture.
Yeah, it had culture, exactly. Exactly. Now it's just LA, Texas. So, yeah.
Thanks to that one person that made that happen.
That rhymes with Mo Hogan. But yeah, so anyways, we'll get to the review here. So technical,
I'd probably give it a 4 out of 10.
I'll go 5. So we'll do 4.5.
4.5.
Yeah.
Musical, I'd go a little higher. I'd go 6.5 probably, or a 7.
Yeah, so I think musical is worth a bit more because of the finger-picking style of guitar playing, which ended up influencing a lot of bands later on, like the Shaky Graves, call direct influence to Townes Van Zandt's style of guitar playing. Even the Kings of Leon have Caleb Falwell from the Kings of Leon, the lead singer. He has referenced TVZ as one of his inspirations for not just guitar playing but also songwriting. So a big kind of reach of people that are influenced by his music and by specifically his finger picking style of guitar. So I'm gonna go. What'd you give it?
I gave it like a 6 or a 7. So 6.5.
6.5. Okay, I'll give it a 7.5.
7.5?
Yeah, just because he also did a ton of it himself.
So he's 7, so we're at like 5.75 right now.
Okay, now this is the one where I think we go high on is
lyrics.
the lyrics.
Yeah, I would give it like a 9.
Yeah, I mean, he's a poignant lyricist, and he's up there. I mean, one of the quotes that kind of haunted him for a good chunk of his life was that, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's also a singer, and it was kind of, TVZ was kind of his mentor for a little bit. He was like, oh, Townes Van Zandt is the best songwriter of all time. Like he stands on a table above Bob Dylan and all this stuff. And they actually, on one of his later albums.
Well, I mean, Bob Dylan's pretty shorty. I don't think he has to stand on a table.
Yeah. But one of his later albums, they directly printed the quote right on the front of the album. And Townes Van Zandt was mortified by it. And the guy that said the quote ended up backpedaling, be like, I'm not saying he's better than Bob Dylan, but he's certainly up there. He had to like backpedal a little bit because Townes Van Zandt was so embarrassed, and then fucking Tomato Records plastered it on his '87 album. Yeah, which is pretty embarrassing.
That was pretty catch-up of him.
Yeah, thanks. Joke didn't really work, but yeah, I appreciate it. So you're giving it a 9. I'm going 10 on lyrics.
10?
I mean, some of the lyrics itself, like even just on Waiting Around to Die, is just like really poignant stuff. I mean, he's a poet, and he writes really incredible music. He paints a picture. Same with I'll Be There in the Morning. I mean, he paints a picture about, just comforting this girl that he's going to be there the next day.
Yeah.
She's crying, she's worried, and he's a really, really great storyteller and a songwriter. So
I'd say, yeah. So then we're at 9.5 with it.
Yeah.
And
so
then
5.5. This is
5,
tough.
5.5, 9.5. So then we got to go, it goes to 7.5.
7.5.
And then album art.
So this one is tough. I can't say you can give it a huge rating because it's just a photo.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly think it kind of sets the mood to the album. It matches the album.
It looks pretty depressing.
Yeah, I mean, he's sitting in his hand. It's just like a wide table. And that the house, like they said in the quote, is definitely really put together, and it kind of is a direct opposite of him. You're struggling here. I'll go a 7 on the album art. I think it suits it, but it's not anything like, it's of the time. It's a picture of the artist.
I'd give it a 7 as well. So we're at a 7 now.
So now the reception. Now this one might be a little difficult to rate because it wasn't really received at first. And
commercially it wasn't, and critically it was kind of
until later on in his life. Like I said, his life kind of changed in the 80s when he got all those covers done by those other artists, and that kind of set him up for the rest of his life, and then set up this cult status for him going forward. Like there was a small fan club for him in the 80s, in the 70s that was started, and like people would write him letters, and it would be like, oh, like you understand depression and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But I can't say he had like a big following back then. So I mean, it's tough to give it a big reception. I mean, now you can. So we kind of got to maybe meet halfway on it.
Yeah, I feel like because at the time, like commercially, it didn't do amazing. But I mean, at the same time, you look at it on Spotify now, and like you see that it's got like 100 million streams. Those songs are very popular now. So I would probably go like right down the middle at like a 5.
See, I'll go a 7 just for legacy purposes. I think just because he wasn't a small independent artist back then, he didn't have the means of today, where kind of once the internet came around and streaming, he's picked up all the traction that, to say if he released this sort of music now, like a Coulter Wall or something like that, he would probably gain the same sort of traction and, become a mainstay in singer-songwriter country. Yeah. So I'll give him a 7 on that.
Okay. So because of your reasoning, I'd actually bump it up to a 6, so that we're at 6.75 all around across the board. Does it hold up? Yeah.
I think it holds up. I mean, it doesn't feel particularly like dated as the style of music. Certainly they don't this isn't mainstream country music anymore. No. And not really even mainstream folk or indie music anymore.
Even then it wasn't really mainstream country music.
No, I mean, the style of Americana is still around, but it certainly wasn't as popular as it was in the 60s into the 70s. I certainly think it does hold up. I think you could listen to this and even his style of singing, it's old school, but his voice has got a little bit of a modern tinge to it. He still has that country twang to it as well.
Yeah.
But it's not like the country of the 50s or even the, early 60s. It's completely different.
It is very unique in that sense.
It does, like you said, it does kind of compare a little bit to Johnny Cash, in a sense. I agree with that they're both not, fantastic singers, but that's not where the content comes from. That's not where that's not what you're going for.
Well, and also a lot of musicians back then, it wasn't necessarily that they were fantastic singers. It was that like their presentation of said song had emotion to it, Yeah, so overall I think we'd have to go with like a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I can agree with a 7 out of 10, and I personally, like, I would probably if we weren't doing this criteria, I would rate it higher for myself personally. And then within his catalog, I would rate it very, very high. Like if we weren't following like the way we break it down, we do this total score. Like I would personally give it more of an 8.5 to a 9, just in my opinion. But I know we have to average it out on all these different categories, and it does kind of skew the score a little bit. But I can live with a 7, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess.
You guess?
Is this our lowest rated album?
No. We have a few that are lower.
Yeah.
What was a 6 out of 10? There was one of them was a 6 out of 10. I know that. No, because we didn't rate those ones.
No, that's right.
Those were rec-episodes. It might have been. Oh shit! I don't know.
Yeah, I can't recall.
No, but I personally I would lean more towards a higher score, just because there's also the aspect that I related to this album quite a bit.
Yeah.
And listened to it quite frequently, like 4 or 5 years ago.
All right, let's do 7.5 out of 10.
That just makes my willy nice and hard. Fantastic.
All right, well, this has been Misfits on Vinyl. All right, one thing I have to plug before we go. This Wednesday at the Tea House, doing the fundraiser show for Sandy Cooper Black. We're almost sold out. We still got a few tickets left, so please come on out. We're hoping to get $750 raised. I think I've talked about it enough, but yeah, Sandy Cooper Black got in an accident. He's now paralyzed from the waist down, and we're trying to raise money so that he can, have the ability to stay in the long-term spinal care facility. And also it takes the financial strain off his family, everything else like that. Help with getting, their house wheelchair accessible, et cetera, et cetera. So please come on out. It would mean a lot to me. Like I said, we're almost sold out, so I really...
7 p.m.?
7 p.m.
Yeah.
Tickets are $15. And amazing lineup. We got Dale Ward, Laurie Gibbs, Leah Scheitel, Amol Suri, Cowboy Cole Robertson, Mark McHugh, and Gabby Rose. So
is Siobhan on that as well?
I don't know yet, because if she's able to get back into the city in time, she'll be on it. But if not, then she won't.
Well, if you need any more incentive after that awesome lineup, me and I don't know, Sam, are you going to be there? Me and Sam the Tech Man are going to be there.
Sam the Tech Man and Aaron are going to be there.
You guys can meet your heroes.
Yeah, you can meet your heroes.
Well, Spencer raises money for a great cause.
Yeah.
So
I actually might have you guys bring me up at the start of the show instead of having one of the comics do it.
Oh, that'd be fun.
That'd be fun.
I could do that for you.
That'd be fun. That would be a nice little Misfits on Vinyl crossover with the real world.
anyways, guys, we appreciate you. Love you lots.
Love you. Anal
contusions. Thank you for listening to this episode of Misfits on Vinyl, hosted by Spencer Streichert and me, Aaron Walsh, and of course produced by Sam the Tech Man, Sam Lindsay. If you like us, please rate us, subscribe to us, share us. Our socials are Misfits on Vinyl Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. If you want to send us an email with any suggestions or criticisms, we love that shit, so send it away. It's misfitsonvinyl@gmail.com. We love you guys. Thank you.